Allow me to introduce the esteemed educators for this round. They are Wan Christina binti Wan Nizahan Zamari, Maywin Mujanghi. And the timekeeper for this round is Putri Alea. The motion for today's debate is the House believes that to achieve change, peaceful methods are no longer viable. The government side is from College Yasan KYUEM. The Prime Minister is Olivia. The Deputy Prime Minister is Teo Chen Wen, and the government whip is Jenny. And the opposition in this debate is from College Mara Seremban. The Prime Minister is Muhammad Adam Iqmal bin Muhammad Kasmi, and the Deputy Prime Minister is Fatin Nashwa binti Nur Fidal Sid. The opposition whip is Muhammad Samuel Haikal bin Hamdan. Before we begin, here is a brief reminder of the rules. Each speech is 7 minutes long. The bell will be rung once at the first minute indicating the start of POI and at the 6th minute indicating the end of POI. No points or information can be presented outside of this window. The bell will be rung twice at 7 minutes indicating the end of speech. The reply speech should be 4 minutes long. No points or information may be offered during the reply speech. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Government Prime Minister, Olivia, to open the case for their side.
Good morning, everyone. As the first speaker of the government side, I would like to start the case by saying that this debate revolves around a world where a specific community, perhaps a country's citizens or a minority group, has been faced with an immense and troubling crisis of conflict that brings them great harm, whether it be economically, socially, or physically. This conflict could look like a war or corruption, and is usually brought upon by a larger authority body such as government. This motion is referring to that community trying to overcome the crisis to achieve change and hopefully for the better of all by going against that authority body that brings about their troubles. This debate is discussing the two polar opposite methods of achieving change, which are peaceful methods and aggressive methods, and comparing the effectiveness of other methods. I would like to start by giving a definition of peaceful methods. These are any method that does not include violence or harm to others. And the definition of change is the process through which something becomes different. And we define viable as the capability of working towards a goal successfully. As the side of the government, our stance is that we believe heavily in the usage of more aggressive methods in bringing about change. To clarify, this is not about banning or completely disregarding the use of peaceful methods, but we believe in the majority of case studies, it shows that peaceful methods simply serve as a futile attempt to bring about change. It rather acts as a water bank for more danger, chaos, and harm to breed. Because if the authority body refuses to acknowledge the peaceful protests due to the lack of threat to them, they will continue to suppress them easily and continue the harm that they are already causing to society. We wish to uphold peace and human rights of people, of course. However, if the current crisis with or without aggressive methods already violates the human rights of people and collapses peace, we think that the community has every right to use the act of violence, similar to this, in order to bring about the change result. If peaceful methods cannot work in the first place, we justify the usage of violence and harsher methods, but only as a last resort. The stakeholders that we believe in is the general public, society, and the government and authorities. First of all, we believe that peaceful methods are ineffective in inducing change, and this is the burden of the opposition. Peaceful protests only work if those in power are willing to listen to it. What do peaceful protests look like? They look like marches, holding up signs, creating organizations and movements. Despite seemingly kind and gentle, one thing that we must note is that kindness and gentleness poses no threat or deterrence against an authority body that's most likely already harmful to others, harmful towards that community or society. This means that if the authority is unwilling to listen or conform to these peaceful methods, and most likely continuing their harms because it benefits them at the cost of society, peaceful methods can be compared to virtually not doing anything to bring about change. Our burden as the government team is to deal with physical chaos and consequences in bringing out change in such aggressive methods. However, we should all recognize that the harm inflicted by using aggressive methods is not as great as the persistent harm that exists with peaceful methods not bringing out any change. Peaceful methods are equivalent to not doing anything to bring about change as long as the authorities are unwilling to listen. In aggressive methods, at least something is being done in creating incentive for change. We should understand that peaceful protests only work if those in power are willing to listen and negotiate, and this is the opposition's burden. Therefore, the opposition must answer us on how their method is more effective, and they have to prove that how such methods are able to make any difference in the decisions of policymakers. Peaceful protests don't pose a threat to governments and authorities. Therefore, there will be no spark to ignite an incentive for change in government officials. As a well-known example is the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 following the death of George Floyd. From this specific example, we can see how peaceful methods are not viable. As people on the internet were peacefully protesting and people on streets were also peacefully protesting, we can see that no change was being made. However, once violence and aggression was included in these protests, the situation started getting better and authorities started to make change. Another example is since August 2016, some American athletes have protests against police brutality and racism by starting with kneeling at the US national anthem. This is an example of a peaceful method, and this wasn't met with those in power discussing it. Instead, it was met with ridicules and people refusing to support the team, thus leading to those kneeling, getting removed and fired. And from this, we can also see that peaceful methods are not viable and aggression is needed in order to have change. Therefore, this House believes that peaceful methods are not viable in creating change and aggression is needed in order to make this more effective. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now please welcome the Opposition Prime Minister, Muhammad Adam Iqmal bin Muhammad Kasmi, to open the case for their side.
Hello, can you see me? All right, thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. Time starts. Started. Hello. Oh, that's started. All right, sorry. So, good evening, members of the hall. Good evening, members of the hall. Today, I, as the leader of the opposition, shall be arguing in opposing to the motion that this House believes that to achieve change, peaceful methods are no longer viable. So we, as the opposition, shall oppose this motion under the rationale that sustainable, humane, and effective way of creating change is actually through peace. Because why? Because the people are peace is the method by which people are more willing to accept, both for the people wanting the change and also the people opposing change. The opposition admits that violence can enact change, but whether or not that change is viable in the long run is comparable to peace is something that the opposition disagrees with. So for my first refutation, for my first review, the PM side said that peaceful protest poses no threat to the current government. I question that because peaceful protest does not just include saying that we want change, we want this to stop. No. Peaceful protest also includes things such as socio-economic threats, collective bargaining, things that threaten the economy and sort of the working class structure of the entire country itself. So how can you say there is no threat towards the current government when the people who are actually compose of the country, who make the country run, are currently opposing to government, poses no threat to the government itself? And your second point is that how can the opposition deal with physical chaos, physical wars through peace? Is that let's look at an example such as Africa. In Africa, there's African warlords and tribalism going on, and this this is an example of violence. People want to create change better for only themselves. And so how can you how can you oppose these warlords through war? Because this method to which you oppress another people will only create more sort of violence in and of itself, whereby these warlords itself, in trying to enact change, they topple and create instability towards the current government itself. So this relates to my first point. My first point is that peace is the method that is easiest to get people on board. With popular support of peaceful change, the socio-economic pressure, whether through intimidation of collective labor or through intimidation of the current political structure, they threaten the current ruling class of government, to which, if they don't enact this change right now, they would suffer, the country itself would suffer, and by extension, the ruling class itself would also suffer. This means that most people would not resort to violence at the first place. We do admit that in desperation, violence may be necessary. However, that will relate to my second point itself. Most people would have been alienated by violence. This is shown by example by the People Power Revolution in 1986, whereby 2 million Filipinos took down the dictator Ferdinand Marcos through civil disobedience. This shows that some peace can create change. Peace is the most effective and humane way. How would you say if the People Power Revolution in 1986 created change through violence, wouldn't that crumble the Filipino economy apart? Thus, the opposition concludes that since to enact change, we would have required popular support, enacting violence would be counterproductive towards that end goal, since you would alienate a bunch of people, not just the minority itself, but also the larger people at hand in that argument, in creating that change. And this relates to my second point. Yes, violence can create change, but can create a positive change. How can you be so sure that violence would not make the situation worse? We do admit that in desperation, violence may be necessary. However, how can violence guarantee good change? We've seen time and time again with peaceful popular support that change would have been more, that change is more effective compared to if we do it in a violent way. Compare this to Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement in 1960s, where 25,000 people marched in demonstrations, protests, and the effects of that movement is that the government passed laws to make equality. So for example, even if we had let's compare two examples here: popular violent support and popular peaceful support. Within those two popular change, which one would you think would create the more positive, the more effective outcome? This is the point in the debate. Which is more viable, peaceful or violent? And it begs the question whether violence would continue after that change is made or not, since the very nature of violent protest and violent support means that you can't guarantee after that change has been made, people are content, people are happy with the current change. Some people may be unhappy, and that would create more violence, and that would be irresponsible, it would be negative towards the country. So if we're talking violent support by a minority, would people call themselves, would the government or other people call them terrorists? Wouldn't that be counterproductive towards the progress in enacting that change, since you are also alienating a bunch of other people by enacting violence? And so this is also supported by the research by the Harvard Kennedy School, by which the Professor Erica Chenoweth showed that non-violence resistant campaigns are 10 times as likely to result in democratic change compared to violent uprisings. That's it. I stand my case. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I present the government deputy speaker to continue the case for their side.
Is everything okay?
Hi, sorry, before you guys start, I'm so sorry for interrupting midway, but can you do a voice check please and an audio check please, because I couldn't hear the previous speaker absolutely clearly, but it's audible. So just do a audio check before you start. Thanks.
All right. Am I audible? And am I visible?
Yeah, perfect, loud and clear, thanks.
Yeah, okay.
Test. Can you hear us? Hello.
Yes, we can, but just keep yourself closer to the mic.
Yes. You're going to have to come in closer, Visa. Tak boleh, you can't stand like me.
I meant to audio checks before your speech, so you guys are fine now.
All right. So I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So let me first begin with my rebuttals. So team opposition mentioned that people by using peaceful methods, then people are more to accept and give support to the organization. However, let me say that this is not sufficient. You might have it might be easier for you to get support, but let us look at the case of the African American. People want support African Americans to have more rights, to fight for their rights. However, does the change occur? Does the change occur for a short period of time? No, it happens after 50 years, and this is not the impact. Impact takes a long time to change. And then there's also the case where it is viable in the team opposition mentioned that peaceful methods are more viable in the long run compared to more aggressive methods. However, I'll be rebutting in my points about how aggressive methods actually prove to achieve more long-term effects rather than short run. And furthermore, team opposition also mentioned that peaceful protest has social economic threats. However, let me argue that while these threats, while peaceful protests, yes, they do pose social economic threats, but how long will it last? How long will the strikes will last? How long are people willing to leave their jobs to actually fight for a cause which has no guarantee to be achieved? People still need to work, they still need to make a living, and this is what peaceful protests can't promise you. They can't promise a significant change. And if the work union is weak, then these workers will face the risk of being fired from their work, and it is something that we do not want. And these labor forces would also be willing to work more if they are given more pay. And the peaceful protest, while it might work, it might not gain that kind of support that we all need to make an impactful change. Besides, team opposition also argue about how violent methods are more effective. Now, let me ask you back. How can you ensure that peaceful methods are also effective? Yes, peaceful methods may be popular, but you cannot effectively ensure that they work. And let me further elaborate through my points on how more aggressive methods actually help to bring change to this scenario. So moving on to my first point. So let's justify why aggressive methods are more impactful. So the harm caused by aggressive methods, we would say, are justified because the harm they are less compared to letting the current situation persist. So imagine a situation where a country with its people are suffering from human rights abuses, bad economy. So in these kinds of situations, do you prefer this kind of people to continue suffering rather than actually bring about physical action, being more aggressive in voicing out your stance to people, to let them know about how significant the cause that you are fighting for, to actually let yourself be heard more. So think about it. And besides, not banning, we are not saying that we are banning peaceful methods. It's just that these peaceful methods, they are not viable and less effective compared to the violent methods. Peaceful methods, they might work in some situations, but if we are striking for a big change, for a serious situation, for a serious issue such as human rights or a bad economy or corruption, then we need aggressive methods to achieve this aim. Peaceful methods, they hardly work when you want to go against a big authority. So people may protest, but big authorities, they might list, as long as they remain in power, they won't worry about they don't care about the harm that they are causing, as long as they can live comfortably and achieve their own self-interest. So aggressive methods, they actually demand attention from these bigger authorities about how serious the problems people are facing and how serious people are willing to go to actually fight for their own rights and to achieve their aim of a better situation or a better economy. So the peaceful methods, they might work, but we can dismiss them as insignificant, because now we are trying to correct a situation which has persisted for a long time, where the country is facing huge problems that needs significant action. And in order to bring about significant action, there must be incentive. And this is where more aggressive methods step in to provide these kinds of incentives to people. Moving on to my next point, aggressive methods, they actually achieve longer term impacts compared to peaceful methods, as opposed to what the opposition had mentioned. So aggressive methods, they pose as a deterrence. So let's give an analogy of how jail, the punishment of jail actually deters criminals from recommitting crimes. So this is a good example of how the aggressive methods actually has this kind of threat or impact to the authority to ensure that they bring about what people want, a better scenario. So the impact of aggressive methods, they are bigger, and it proves that the community, they are willing to go to any lengths to expand this kind of violence in order to achieve the change. So these kinds of aggressive methods, they are usually scary and poses actual harm and actual damages, and they might threaten the power of the authorities, like storming into the halls of the governments, such as in the Sri Lanka case, where people actually where they are actually dissatisfied with the authority. So they actually took the physical action to protest. So out of fear of the incidents from occurring, the government or the authority, they are still people. So they are afraid of the harm that these kinds of protests will bring to them. So they are fear that the government might be overrun. So that is why they will actually be more willing to take more significant, more impactful change to bring about more lasting impacts to our society. So they wouldn't try to reverse these changes that have been made through these aggressive methods, compared to using peaceful methods where maybe it might be effective in the short run, where the authority makes a few small changes to the situation, but slowly it might revert back to the situation where that has been used to, or it doesn't bring about that kind of impact we need to the society. We are talking about something big that will impact the country, and these kinds of changes aren't easy to make and isn't something that can be done with just one or two changes in law. It requires commitment and action, and that is why it is important that these aggressive methods actually act as an incentive for the authorities, for people to actually fight for the authorities to bring about these kinds of greater change. So overall, I would say that when we believe that more aggressive methods, they actually bring about the change that we need. So if peaceful methods can't help with the problem, then these more aggressive methods should be used as a last resort to help to rectify these situations and make a better world for people. Is evil for the greater good, the greater cause where people are all fighting for a better society, economy, and having their voices heard in the great world that will actually ensure that these kinds of changes occur in our society. And with that, we propose. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now, please welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to continue the case for their side.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Hello. I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Okay. Thank you. First. Okay. So, in opposition side, we believe that change is by the people for the people, and therefore we believe that in order to make change, we must ensure that it is for the greater good of the people in the long run and the livelihoods of the future generations. So a very good day I bid to everyone present. So I, as the second speaker of the opposition side, would like to share my views regarding what was brought upon to us by the government side, but also telling you what we inside opposition believes in. So let's get into what was mentioned by the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister mentioned something about that the harms in violent methods are much lesser than in peaceful methods. And they mentioned something along the lines of that at least something is being done compared to in peaceful methods. What they're implying is that peaceful methods aren't effective in the long run. Well, to some extent, to this, I would like to reply that that is not the case, especially when we're trying to make a long-lasting change in the society. So the Deputy Prime Minister also mentioned something, it might be easier to garner support when using a peaceful method, but change happens after a long period of time, in which we inside opposition believes that it's better for us to take the time that we need because good things takes time, instead of rushing things and not thinking the effects that we're going to suffer from by the end of the day, in which I will go on into my point later on. Other than that, they also mentioned something that how can you ensure that the peaceful methods are more effective when you can't guarantee that it works. This I would like to reply, how can you guarantee that violent methods will work the same? They mentioned that in violent methods, risk is less than the harms when people opt for peaceful methods, such as what was mentioned by my leader of opposition, in which he mentioned about collective bargaining, where people actually went on a protest to the government by not going to work, by starving themselves, in which will affect the economy. So the side government questioned this. They asked how long will people be willing to suffer in order to make a change. To this, I'd like to point out that the risk when using violent methods are much bigger than when we're using collective bargaining. Because how willing are people to actually put their lives at stake to actually put their lives at stake in order to make a change when compared to putting their jobs at stake. Let's compare these two risks that they are taking. We inside opposition believes that it is much more plausible for people to actually opt to lose their jobs instead of losing their lives. Okay, so now moving on to my point, which is why we inside opposition believes that peace is the way to go, is that we believe in sustainable and long-term effect when it comes to change. When we're opting for change, we're thinking about the future generations. When we're opting for change, we're opting for lasting change that will have a positive impact on our society. So how is absent in when we opt for violent change is that in violent methods, people opt for in violent methods, people would rather kill other people. People would rather destroy properties, in which would cause a lot of casualties by the end of the day. So I ask you, how eligible are these people who are willing to opt for violence to take power in the government? Imagine yourself being imagine yourself in a world where in a country where we have a tyrant as a government. So the society decided to be violent in order to take power from the government. How can we ensure that the people who take the power is eligible enough to ensure the peace that they're going to when they're going to rule the government? Okay, so okay. So other than that, emphasizing on the idea that side opposition believes in sustainability over immediate effect, we believe that from peaceful methods, people are able to garner the trust from the people while also building the country in the long run. Because what I mentioned earlier, a country runs by the people. So we are able to gather more trust when the new government takes over. This is absent in the world that the government side is providing, in which people take power by force, in which the cycle of violence will continue on until until someone tries to break the violence by opting for peaceful methods. So by the end of the day, side opposition provides you the world where people are able to stand for themselves without risking their lives or the livelihood of others. By peaceful methods, people are able to make a change while also limiting the casualty that comes with it, and also ensuring that the livelihood of the government itself after the revolution lasts for a lifetime, instead of just that one moment where they take over the government. So with that, I would like to reaffirm our stance, which is side opposition firmly believes that peaceful methods are the way to go when it comes to trying to achieve change in the long run, because it provides sustainability and also caters to the livelihoods of the society. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Now please welcome the government whip to continue the debate for their side.
Hi, am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are visible and audible.
All right, I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. I want to first start my speech with a brief case summary, right? I'll leave it most of it to the reply speaker, but once again, our team already gave you arguments. Threefold. Number one, they tell you about the ineffectiveness of peaceful methods in bigger crises such as war or people being oppressed. Second, they talk about how violence is justifiable in certain situations and why it is by any necessary means a last resort to bring about the change that people deserve, especially going against a difficult situation. And last of all, they told you about the impact of aggressive methods and how this change acts as a deterrent, as people are afraid of violent methods repeating again. And even those people participating in these aggressive methods are worried about participating in these aggressive methods. So I can guarantee you, nobody ever wants to engage in any physical or violent protests if possible. So we already said this is more of a last resort, and this is why we think that the change is impactful and the violence will be justified in bringing about this long-term change. So first of all, before I move on to my rebuttals today, let me tell you about what this debate should have been about in the first place and the metrics to win. This debate should have been about which method of bringing about change is ultimately more suitable for arguing for larger and deeper issues buried within the core of a country, society, or community, right? Whether it regards governmental corruption or unspoken oppression of certain communities. Understand that the harms caused by a government or any other authority body more often than likely benefits them. This gives them no large incentive, as my second speaker has already said, to actually conform to the change that is wanted by the public unless it ultimately poses a serious threat to them personally. Furthermore, this debate should also have been about changes itself on the terms of which is more long-term and impactful to serve as a solid metric between government and opposition side to win. If side government can prove A, that we have more of the effectiveness of persuading an authority to conform to a change, B, the impact of the change brought is better than the impact of the change brought by peaceful methods, all this through aggressive methods, we think that we can take the floor for this debate today, and that is what I'll ultimately be proving in my speech today. So ultimately, I felt that side opposition was more focused on, for example, very surface level things such as the popularity of the method of either method within society, which we felt wasn't particularly relevant based off the fact that there is no specific goal or movement that we are talking about in this debate today. So let's base it on the fact and equal grounds that methods garner enough supporters, as we are simply arguing on the fact on which one is more effective. But I would still like to back up this statement by using Black Lives Matter protests as an example, in which millions participated in the aggressive methods and it was ultimately effective in the end, which I will elaborate even further on my speech. Before I get to my rebuttals, I would also like to talk about the burden that my first speaker has already mentioned, the burden that opposition side has to prove. First of all, they need to prove how they are able to overcome this, right? Understand that in order to deal with that burden, they have to ensure that the authority is willing to negotiate, and we've already told you why that is less than likely, as the harm that they are causing is more than often benefiting them, those who are in power, that is. So this does not give them any incentive for them to stop what they're doing, and especially not to listen to peaceful methods that do not pose a personal threat to them, right? This was the biggest thing that wasn't engaged by side opposition. They didn't engage with their largest burden that my first and second speaker has already mentioned throughout their speech. Now let's get straight to the rebuttals, right? And also I want to make a key clarification is that we are not aiming to cause any harm. We also wish to do things peacefully. We are people. So, but if things are in a standstill, change is not being brought about, people are still stuck in a conflict that violates their human rights, that collapses their peace, we justify the usage of violence and aggression to bring about change, right? So let's get to the main issues and my refutation. So let's talk about the first issue, which is violence and its justification. Opposition tells us a number of things, right? First, that violence breeds more violence, or that peace is more humane and acceptable. They also question us on how violence can guarantee change and how willing are people to put their lives or jobs, or whether or not people are willing to put their lives at stake or their jobs at stake, and also how violence can cause casualties, and they question the eligibility of people to take power in the government, right? First of all, let me tell you that we think violence is merely a means of a last resort again. So in order to go against a crisis or conflict such as a war that is already violating their human rights, we think that this is perfectly humane and acceptable as well. Because in the first place, the situation that they are in, the conflict or crisis that they are in, is already not humane, it's already unacceptable. We think as it's similarly to how the justice system permits self-defense, we think it's okay for communities who want to try and fight against a difficult problem with violence, right, that is already causing them harm. So we understand that there is a fear of the cycle of violence, but like I already mentioned before in the beginning of my speech, violence scares people. And like the opposition themselves agree, violence is something that everyone wants to avoid and it's something that people don't want to accept or participate in, right? But I'll tell you why it won't repeat after the first violent, aggressive protest or method, right? We tell you it won't repeat because in the first place, these people who are participating in these aggressive methods are participating in this protest as a last resort because they know peaceful methods are not bringing them any change. So this is their final resort that they put themselves, their jobs, their lives at expense so they can bring the change that might give them a better world for themselves and their children and their future generations. So once this change has been brought about, I can guarantee you nobody will want to participate in these aggressive methods ever again as long as they have achieved their goal of bringing change for the better of all, right? That is why we think that the violent cycle will not repeat. I also think that opposition doesn't comprehend the severity of certain conflicts, right? This is why they ask whether or not people are able to put their jobs or lives at stake. I say this because people are willing to put their lives at stake for a change that will affect future generations, right? They are not, but even if they do, we think they are perfectly eligible. Like the leader of the Poland work union, which is like Walisa, he was able to bring about change. He was able to give his people and his workers a better life and a better economic state, so even through more aggressive methods, right? We think that these people who are they know what they are fighting for. We think that they have the power to take government. We think that they are perfectly suitable to have some power and try to bring about change to society, right? We win because we can justify the use of violence because we comprehend the depth of crises that violates people's human rights and violates their peace. We think that we understand how people are really able to fight for what they want at the expense of their lives or jobs, as long as it brings about the change they deserve. This tips us over opposition because opposition only argues on moral grounds, but in many of these conflicts, morals don't even exist when people's lives are being destroyed. And with that, I end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now, please welcome the opposition whip to continue the debate for their side.
Hello, am I audible? Hello,
Yes,
am I
you're audible.
Am I visible too? I'll take that as a yes. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Salutations, fellow judges, timekeepers, and members of parliament. I, as the whip, am given the opportunity to deconstruct and rebut the arguments made alongside proving that only one side has strongly affirmed their stance in a balanced manner. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Timekeeper, and members of parliament. The fundamental question in this debate, which is this House believes that in order to achieve change, peaceful methods are no longer viable, is the fact that has violence created the necessary change that we need? And has truly peace failed to create change? Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at what today's debate is all about. It's about whether peace is better than violence or violence is better than peace. Clearly, we're saying that the government side is supporting in aggression, while the opposition is supporting for a more peaceful method. But we believe there is certain areas where the government truly lacks when it comes to presenting their case. Ladies and gentlemen, they presented their case as if that peace should be done first, and then violence is, however, the last resort. But they keep on saying how much that peace is useless. Then why should you even refer to peace in the first place? Ladies and gentlemen, yet they've stated that somehow violence is the last resort, as if that we should use peace first. And that's what we're saying, because it is still viable. Ladies and gentlemen, they've stated about how peace is a water bank for more danger and chaos to breed, yet they keep saying how violence should be the last resort. People will take peace as the first resort. And then you'll say that it is a water bank for more danger and chaos to breed. So what is the government trying to prove here? We have from the opposition side, it seems that they're trying to contradict themselves in so many ways about how they are trying to defend peace, about how it should be used, but then they say about how it's also really bad. And so people should instead go for violence, but then they say that violence is, again, a last resort. ladies and gentlemen, they've stated so they lack in a lot of substance in trying to justify what it really means, and that governments are not willing to listen to the people because it simply does not affect them at all. But we see in many democracies that these days, even simple demonstrations can destroy the reputation of the administration. For example, when we had JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson administration in the United States, protests had made the reputation of the governments as if they were ineffective and needed to pressure themselves in trying to create a proper change. That's why Lyndon B. Johnson paved way for the Great Society to pay for progress in racial equality. Yet they have not. They've as if they. Yes.
You mentioned that violence is not a viable solution, but if we first nobody would want to resort to violence. We will always resort to peace first. But the fact that we would at last resort to violence shows something about peace being not a viable solution towards combating these issues.
Ladies
so
and gentlemen, what we're talking here is simply that peace in itself it should be the first one, because if we're able to make something from it, then it is greater for everyone else. Violence, however, causes a lot of problems. From what our members of parliament have stated, it brews more violence, it creates disorder, instability. We want peace as the first method. However, what the government is trying to portray is that violence should be the first one, because peace is inherently useless. Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue to what the Deputy Prime Minister has said. It stated that peace is insufficient, it's not enough. But here's the thing, progress itself is from the people themselves. They've taken to the streets, they've done civil disobedience, they've stopped working. We've seen it work in Czechoslovakia, the Velvet Revolution 1989, 500,000 Czechs stopped working, collective and economic unions, they struck against the government. Government couldn't work anymore. They had to surrender to these protests, which ended up to the more democratic government. They work. People's Power Revolution 1986, 2 million Filipinos took down to the streets and they did civil disobedience of the church support, and they succeeded. Why? Because it's the people that control the governance. It's the people. The government serve the people. It's not the people serving the government. It's the government serving for the people. In conjunction, they said that aggressive methods pose as a deterrence. But to be honest, aggressive methods are actually breeding more violence. We see it in Syria, where the Free Syrian Army are resorting to violence, which drew more instability, drew more fighting. And they used imprisonment as an analogy, which is, ladies and gentlemen, is comparing bananas to apples. Next, they've stated about how authorities are not going to listen at all due to these peaceful protests, which is another assumption. A lot of governments work for the people, they serve the people. For them to simply not listen to the people, what are the governments playing a role in? They've as if said that all the governments are inherently authoritarian, serving in their own self-interest, which is not the case. Ladies and gentlemen, do you really believe that the government is only interested in their own self-interest? What we're saying here from the opposition side is that peace resonates better with the public. They've stated about how public support is useless. Fact said by the no, sorry, not accepting from the government side. It is no. The thing is that public support is actually the one that is a catalyst when it comes to trying to create change. It shows that a lot of people are supporting in favor of the change, and more people are protesting, the more pressure it takes on the administration, the more the administration will take action in order to prevent endless unnecessary suffering to these people. Hence, we're seeing that in addition, our government side is on a research where we stated about how non-violent resistance are 10 times more to result in democratic change, simply because violence itself creates more violence. However, when it comes to peace, peace creates more peace, and it creates trust between the people and new change. And that's where the opposition stands. We do not want to endanger people's lives. We do not want to create a disorder for our children. We want to create where a society is able to accept peaceful demands. No more aggression. We don't live in the medieval times. We live in the modern society where everyone's voices are heard equally. That's all. I rest my case.
Now that we have heard all the three speakers from both teams, there will be 3 minutes located for preparation or reply speech, starting now. Ladies and gentlemen, the time of 3 minutes has ended. I shall now invite the second speaker from the opposition to make her reply speech.
All right, am I audible?
Common team, it should be the opposition first for the reply speech.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
So throughout this whole debate, we've already seen both of the words that is provided by both of the sides, from side government and side opposition, in which side government emphasizes on opting for violence as a last resort to make change, compared to what side opposition is fighting for, which is opting for peaceful methods when making a change. So let's compare the two words that side government and side opposition is providing you. So in side government, the best case scenario that they're giving to you is that, sure, let's say that through violent methods, change is made. But I ask you, how lasting is it? Because what I mentioned in my speech earlier is that when governments are taken over by people who opt for violent methods, the tendency for the new ruler to be violent to the people itself is very likely, in which the cycle of violence will keep on continuing. Now let's look at the best case scenario in opposition side, in which we are able to garner change by using peaceful methods. So when using peaceful methods, not only the casualties are able to be reduced, but the change is also sustainable in the long run, in which the new ruling of the new government's ruling will be accepted by the majority of the people, in which this is absent in the government's situation, where what we understand is that most people usually won't really opt for violence and disagree with violent means. So now moving on, what side government gave the burden to the side opposition, in which they mentioned along the lines of that when peaceful methods are only functional when government are willing to negotiate. To this, I answer, I'll emphasize on the idea that peaceful methods isn't necessarily just speaking up on your rights. It's also collective bargaining, in which we give pressure to the government, but in a way that is less riskier and doesn't involve the lives of others. So by this logic, we are still able to pressure the government to make a change, and especially when the government isn't willing to negotiate. So, but inside government, when we talk about governments, side government opts for violent methods because they opt for violent methods when the government aren't willing to negotiate. But how can you be so sure that the government won't retaliate to your violence? Because as we know, the government has power over the country's defense systems and therefore have much better equipment. How can you ensure that your violent movement is able to win against the government, which has the upper hand in the long term? So in this case, we're saying that side government is taking a risk that is too big for a change that can be made in side opposition's world, where we are taking the peaceful method. But okay, so now let's look at the downside of side opposition, in which it takes a longer time to make a change. Sure, it takes a longer time, but we also believe that the effect is much long term. We believe that it is a little price to pay to be patient and to be peaceful in making the change, in order for us to ensure the better livelihood for the long term. When inside government, they only emphasize on immediate change without taking consideration of the sustainability of it in the future. So last but not least, I would like to emphasize on how it will affect the people itself and how it will affect the livelihood of the country in the future. So let's look at side governments. The world that side government is giving to you is that when they opt for violence in instilling change, this is giving the idea to the younger generations, in which when they learn about history of their own country, it will give them the idea that violence is okay. It will lead to future generations to be more violent in ruling the country in the future, because as we know, the younger generation is the leader of tomorrow. But this is different when compared to side opposition, in which we are instilling the idea of peace in future generation in order to create a better world, a better country that emphasizes on peace. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the government's second speaker to present their reply speech.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So team government has already provided solid points as to why we win today's debate. So first of all, Prime Minister proposed the point that peaceful protest only works if those in power are willing to listen. Like peaceful protest is almost equivalent to nothing if it doesn't bring about the impact that we need. And Black Lives Matter is an example that has proven that using aggression can achieve goals and help to provide a better solution for the country. Next, Team Government also provided the points as to why aggressive methods are justifiable. The harm caused by these kinds of aggressive methods are so far less compared to those of which when the country is in the state where people's rights are abused, or where people have unspoken rights, or when the economic situation is dire. And these kinds of impacts are what matter most in our society. And that is why the harm, that is the short-term harm caused by these aggressive methods, are justifiable. Besides, we are not banning peaceful methods, as we have already reiterated all over again. These aggressive methods are just last resorts to peaceful methods. So when peaceful methods often doesn't work because it doesn't demand that kind of attention to big authorities. We need people to actually listen, and in order to gain that attention, aggressive methods achieve this aim. Finally, we also presented the points that aggressive methods are proven to be more effective in the long term rather than in the short term, as aggressive methods, they pose as a deterrence. With the looming threat of destruction of people storming into halls, governments would be more careful and more willing to listen to people, to negotiate deals, to achieve more sustainable, longer impact change. And these are what aggressive methods can do, and these are what peaceful methods they cannot achieve. So we are not team violence, we are team change, and we want to achieve change by using more aggressive methods. So moving on to what team opposition has provided. They keep emphasizing about the popularity of the methods. However, we have already rebutted that both methods achieve the same kind of support, as long what we are fighting for is the effectiveness of these methods. And we have shown you time and again that aggressive methods are proven to be more effective. So authorities are also more willing to listen to these people. Next, they also give about the socio-economic impacts of aggressive method protests, such as, but we already proven to you that these kinds of impacts would not be long-lasting. Like, for example, we have given you the argument that people would not risk their jobs in order to fight for a cause that has no guarantee of succeeding, that they are labor, that they have families to feed, that they would still be willing to work as long as they are given enough sufficient pay, and that trade unions, and if trade unions are weak, then people might face the risk of being fired from their jobs, and it's not something that people want. So these kinds of socio-economic impact are not that long-lasting. Next, we also mentioned, team opposition also mentioned about how peacefulness, they guarantee change because they provide that kind of support that we need. But let us ask ourselves, why are those governments not listening? Why do we need to resort to those aggressive methods? Corruption in the government would have bring about these kinds of issues. If the government hadn't been that corrupted, then they would actually listen, and actually we wouldn't have these kinds of aggressive methods in the first place. We wouldn't need to resort to these kinds of resort to these kinds of violent methods. So if peace is long-term, it poses little threat. So why so many general strikes, but things like suffragettes, fighting for a woman's right to vote, and abolishing slavery so effective, permanent, and one-time thing? And violence, that is why we are saying that violence is a last resort. When peace doesn't work, then violence has to become that method to actually achieve that change that we want. We are all people, and we want to avoid violence. We do not want the cycle of violence to repeat. When the peaceful methods is not enough, then aggressive methods needs to step in order to achieve our aim. Aggressive methods, they act as a deterrence. It fights for a sustainable, lasting impact that actually nips the problem in the bud and achieve that change that society wants. The world needs people who takes physical action to demand that kind of action to actually bring about sustainable, lasting impact to our world. And with that, so proud to propose.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this round of debate. It was truly an interesting debate, and I'm sure it will give a hard time to our educators to deliberate who is the winner for this round. So right now, let's allow our educators to go to the breakout room to deliberate. And debaters, please kindly wait in this meeting.
Notify me when I can start.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to time myself first. Start my oral education in 3, 2, 1. So first things first, this is how I'm going to go. First, I'm going to give the call, give you general feedbacks, what you could have done better. And yep, that's all. So first things first, congratulations. It was a very, I say it was a good debate, but it could have been better. It was an average debate. And we have decided that we will give the win to side of government. So congratulations, Malaysia and UAM, I suppose. And so this is why we determined this call. So first thing first, this is actually a very close debate because from the motion, you guys actually didn't carry out the debate that was supposed to be carried out in what we understand in the first place. Because under the motion disability to achieve change, these peaceful methods are no longer viable. This is how it's supposed to go. So set up government should have proved that peaceful methods doesn't longer work anymore. So the problem comes is that when side of government comes up and has a forefront, has a very strong forefront that you guys say that this aggression methods is the last resort. So why is that problematic? It's basically you're kind of agreeing that peaceful is still viable. However, we could not credit that to side of opposition because side of opposition did not call that out. So that's problematic, and hence that is why we choose the win to government. However, it's still a very close debate where the whips really set the parameters out for everyone, and the debate only became properly understood to me in the whip speeches. Why? So we need to understand that a lot of the justifications came from the whip speeches, and good job done by you guys. But then another problem that I have with side of opposition is that it is easier to justify that on side of government, even if they have a problem with their stance, which if they are saying that this is the last resort, we need to believe that the fact that they prove that it is a last resort means they have also proved that peace has failed. So that is why the win has to go to side of government as well, because there's no justification as to why peace still stands on side of opposition. By the way, my oral education will be 5 minutes, so we're on 3rd minute. So general feedback also. So the problem that I also have with side of opposition is that a lot of what you bring is very, I'm not hearing justifications from you guys. So like you say that how eligible are people of the authority to take the power. So the problem with this is that why do the people on the ground have to immediately take power? And even if I give you the best case, even if the people on the ground are taking power, you were still brought down by Jenny's, I think government's words, Jenny's justification as to first, she gave a few justifications that I can outline, which is violence can't guarantee change, violence, this is the rebuttal to violence can't guarantee change, violence will repeat, and so the severity of the conflict, which I definitely agree on. And another thing that I can praise side of government is that the characterization of your case is good. However, the stance is technically wrong. And this is also a reason why I can give the win to side of government, because they say that viable means being able to achieve the goal to success with the cause that you are into. So because in their side of the world, they achieve success, even if it's the last resort. However, what side of opposition didn't prove me enough is that how higher quality of the change that you are going to bring us. Because if you're going to say that violence is going to revolt, that has been rebutted by Jenny, by her saying that because it is a last resort, so because it is a last resort, of course they have fight long enough, so they won't retaliate anyway because they know how hard it is for them to fight for this change. And also another oral adjudication that I could give is that very good. I'm hearing a lot of engagements, but you guys did not flag out the very necessary things in this debate. So for central government, what you should do is that you should just prove and just justify that peaceful methods are no longer viable. And I could give you the win immediately without having to think about your justification, but the justification came very late and you guys say that it was the last resort. However, I still can give the win to you because you did justify how peace is not viable by saying it's a last resort anyways. So you kind of still need aggression. So that kind of, I have to link the dots by myself. So I hope you can avoid that in further debates because you're going to have the edges not being sure to your, I wouldn't say not being sure, but we have to justify ourselves why you would win. So other than that, good job to both side, government and opposition. It was a very good debate, and because the manner is more inquisitive, as I was told, so this is a very good debate. You guys flag out interesting and important stats, and for that, I would end my oral adjudication. Maven, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add. Just as you said, that is all. The whip really brought the balance. I think that is all. Both team whips did extremely well. That's all. That is all.
All right, thanks, Maven. So I'll pass the floor to Chairperson. Good luck in your upcoming rounds. Oh wait, I was told to give my context for personal feedback, so I'm gonna put it in the chat. Reach out to me or Maven for personal feedback. My number is there and my Instagram. I don't think you guys can see because I don't have a choice to put everyone as in the chat, but it's Sunkissed, SUNQISSSSSED, if you want personal feedback before your next rounds. All right, thanks. Chairperson?
Okay, thank you for educators for their feedback. Right now, we'll move on to our second round. But before that, let me check if the debaters from both sides of the next round, Institute Sinaran and Sunway College, are all debaters present right now. Hello and welcome everyone to the second round of the TEDxYouth KYUEM Debate Showcase 2022. My name is Thompson and I'll be your chairperson for this round. Now, allow me to introduce the esteemed educators for this round. They are Iman Amani binti Asmi, Ira Khairim binti Rosnan Hanif, and Amma Husni bin Muhammad Swandi. For our timekeeper, she'll be Putri Alia. Ladies and gentlemen, the motion for today's debate is: as an average person, the House believes that our role in social and environmental movements have been useless, i.e., the actions of mega corporations and the upper echelons of society versus the collective nation. Now, let me introduce the government side. The government side is from Institute Sinaran, and the Prime Minister is Parina Anastasia Baskaran, and the Deputy Prime Minister is Althea Grace Javino, and the government whip is Ryan Reynolds Swibo. For the opposition, they are from Sami College, and the leader of opposition is Karishna Nadaraja, and the deputy leader of opposition is Vignesh Waran Sundrasaga. And finally, the opposition whip is Mio Arif bin Mio Muhammad Farid. Before we begin, here's a brief reminder of the rules for this debate. Each speech is 7 minutes long. The bell will be rung once at the first minute indicating the start of POI and at the 6th minute indicating the end of POI. No points of information can be presented outside this window. The bell will be rung twice at the 7th minute indicating the end of the speech. The reply speech should be 4 minutes long. No points of information may be offered during the reply speech. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Government Prime Minister, Pravina Anastasia Baskaran, to open the case for their side.
Chair, as times change, people do too. And with this, individuals tend to push for systems that align with the current needs and norms of our time. However, we can still see old systems in place because more often than not, the voices of individuals are drowned out by mega corporations. Large corporations hold most of the cards in the political, economical, and social state of the world. No significant movement will occur due to the cries of individuals unless corporations are moved by them. Our roles as individuals in social and environmental movements are limited. There is only so much we can do as we are not the enactors of change. In a world where countless protests and strikes produce little to no results, the livelihoods of the protesters continue to be at stake while mega corporations stay lavished in luxury and riches, keeping them at the top of the food chain. We, the government, believe that the role of an average person in social and environmental movements are fruitless as the Goliaths of the industry continue running the world. Ladies and gentlemen, social and environmental movements are known as today's crutches of hope for individuals, as a way to believe that they are a part of something bigger. Though this may let them dream of a better world, the truth is that no matter the amount of noise they make, individuals will never be the ones to have the final word. That is left up to the government, who values the economy's largest contributors more than any single individual. Audience, my first point is that individual participation in social and environmental movements are extremely messy. This will discourage the people in power to listen to them. Some of the ways that individuals involve themselves in social and environmental movements are through street protests, marches, rallies, and campaigning and strikes. However, for movements to be truly effective, a lot has to be lost on the side of protesters. A peaceful protest will never, ever be enough in the eyes of the government, which is why movements can be dangerous. Take, for example, the anti-lockdown protests that occurred in Canada and the United States of America. These have proven to be dangerous due to the lack of social distancing, and if anything, may have accelerated the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Other than that, we have seen riots such as the infamous Capitol riot, which took place at the White House on January 6, 2021, which has resulted in the deaths of several people and the injuries of many others. All of these bad outcomes happen as a result of the lack of hierarchy and order, as movements consist of non-fraternizing parties coming together with the same core idea, but different ideals or methods of execution. All of these harmful outcomes not only impact the protesters or individuals negatively, they also prove that their attempts of shifting environmental and social movements in their direction have proven to be futile, as if nothing would have been any different even if they didn't attend these rallies, protests, and marches. And with these, mega corporations are still safe and sound, with laws kept in place to protect their best interests. You can even see this with gun control laws, especially in America, where countless protests and mass shootings signal pleas for change, yet nothing ever happens. With that, you can see that individual participation in social and environmental movements have proven to be extremely messy. With little to no change produced, this will cause more harm than good to the protesters, and they won't even get what they asked for at the end of the day. To conclude, I would like to once again reassert the fact that as an average person, our social and environmental movements have been useless because there are no ordered ways in which these movements can be participated in without bringing harm or endangering its protesters, all of which happens while the CEOs of large corporations sit quietly, feeling secure in the knowledge that the measly movements around them have no long-lasting impact, for these corporations will outlive any single individual. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now let us please welcome the opposition, leader of opposition, to open the case for their side.
Hi, sorry, I don't know if you're interrupting, but we cannot hear anything in this meeting.
Sami College, can you hear me now?
We've told in chat, but it only goes to like direct message. I'm sorry, I can see like some of the rings are green, but we cannot hear anything that's being said.
We heard in the beginning, but now we can't hear anything.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
College to open the case for their side.
Sorry, but we were not able to hear anything said by the PM. So do you still want us to continue with our speech now?
Sami College, give us a minute. We'll discuss it first.
Yes, okay, very sorry, but thank you.
Prime Minister of
got in the waiting room, there's another device that we have just in case. Could you all let that in as well?
All right, sure.
Okay. Okay, I will. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Two things. Which side is more capable of bringing about change? Whether it is the everyday ground-to-ground people, your average citizen, or it is members of the upper echelons of society and these mega corporations who are at the top of the food chain, right? The second thing they have to prove is which side can bring about more positive change for society and the environment. Right, so in my speech today, I'm going to prove to you why it is the everyday people, the people on the ground, your average citizen, who's more capable of bringing about these two things, rather than people who are at the top, these mega corporations, the billionaires, and your elite politicians. Right. First, let's start with some characterization of what a social and environmental movement actually are. So this looks like people on the ground, right, who are fighting against injustices, fighting against crimes against the environment, and fighting against racism and discrimination in their state. Right. So this looks like protesting, people going out on the streets and doing demonstrations, right, people making the state, the government, and corporations responsible, holding them accountable for the crimes that they have done. So this also looks like lobbying politicians, right, lobbying politicians to bring about policies that would benefit the society and environment. And it also looks like voting into power people who are capable of bringing about this change, people who are concerned about these changes. Okay, so now there are two problems in the status quo, right, that brings about this debate. Number one, corporations are screwing over the environment. It's very clear. This looks like companies like Nestle who are taking village access water and using it for their own gains. It looks like factories that are dumping toxic waste into rivers because it's an easier way to get rid of their waste. And number two, this discriminatory policies practiced by the state, which leads to like racism in everyday life. This is like apartheid system where a certain group of people are discriminated against who are not given the same opportunities as a different group of people, as a different race. It means like one race of people having better access to healthcare, education, and positions, job positions, and things like that, while another one doesn't. So for these problems to be solved, we need members of social and environmental movements to believe that they are capable of change, that them actively being involved in it can actually bring about change and can make the world better. So some actor analysis before I move into my points, right? Number one, an average person, this is a working citizen, someone from the middle class, someone who attends in our world where they believe that they are capable of making some change. They are people who attend rallies and protest, people who join club meetings that want to bring about greater change for the environment and society, right? These are people, even if they're not such an active member, they are people who share on social media things like how at home you can do things that would improve the environment, or how things that can reduce discrimination and racism in the country. These are people who educate their children, who engage in discussion with other family members about how they, as an individual, can bring about some change that would benefit the world. While on the other side of the house, right, non-believers, people who don't believe that they can actually make any change, who think they're useless when it comes to environmental and social change. There are people who don't believe that their opinions matter, people who don't believe that their active participation will actually do anything, people who believe that corporations and these elite people in the upper echelons of society, they have like ultimate power, and anything that we say and do cannot actually benefit them in any way. So these people don't actually play an active role in trying to bring about this change. So analogy that we can come up with this, an example that I can give you is very obvious to understand, is someone who actually believes that they can make a change in like society and when it comes to like environmental issues, someone who actually would be willing to pay a bit more for a paper bag or a tote bag, for example, compared to someone who does not believe in this and would pay lesser for a plastic bag because they don't believe that their actions has any consequence, has any usefulness on the greater scheme of things. So now, the second actor that we have to consider in this debate here are the corporations and members of the elite classes, politicians and billionaires who are running things from behind the scenes, people who are way up at the top of the food chain, all right? So we have to concede, right, that these companies, these people, for the most part, they are profit-driven. They are consumer-centric. They exist to sell their goods, to sell their merchandise so that they can get profit and they can benefit from that, all right? These are people who have vast amount of resources, whether politically or economically, financially, and we will concede that they are capable of bringing about great change. But as I'll demonstrate my points later, I will show you how, because of the people being involved, this can lead to a greater degree of change. And these are people who, even if they do push for some changes in national policy or in state economy, they are doing it for their own personal benefit, all right? So now another problem with this is that these people are actively detrimental to society and the environment. Like the example I gave earlier, if you are a mega corporation and you need to extract a certain resource, you would be more willing to use like child slaves and like terrible working conditions to get what you want, because that's your benefit. You want your profit, and that is the greatest way to get it. If you're a politician, for example, you would be ready to exploit certain races of people, certain classes of people for your political gain, just so you could get more votes or something like that. So now, one preemptive argument we want to give that these corporations, as we have considered, do have a lot of resources, have a lot of manpower, have a lot of finances, right? And they can block change, or they can bring about change if they wanted to. But now the question we have to consider is, would they even do anything like that if they did not have the incentive to do so? And so in my first argument, okay, I'm going to show you how in our world where people believe that they are useful, where they can contribute to social and environmental changes, they would be able to convince companies to do this, to actually bring about change, to give them the incentive to do so. So the first point that I want to bring up is the first layer to my argument is that by people actively believing that they are useful, that they can bring about great change in social and environmental issues, it means that more people would become involved, and these movements would have a greater degree of membership, that more people would be involved. So more people on the streets protesting, more people sharing on social media, more people going out and educating people on subjects like this, and more people telling us how changes can be made. All right. So as per our own characterization, these are all things that happen. So when this is the case, right, it incentivizes members of upper echelons, it incentivizes billionaires and politicians, elite politicians, and most importantly, it incentivizes these consumer-centric, profit-driven corporations to actually make some degree of change. Now, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of this. If a politician, now what a politician wants the most is votes from the people because he wants to remain in power. Now, if the people who are going to vote for him want a world where policies are in place to protect the environment, policies are in place that are anti-discriminatory, policies are in place where people are not being harmed by this, then this politician would have the incentive to run on these issues, right? He would have the incentive to put these policies into place so that people will vote for him. And that's one way in how people, like the collective nation, can influence the upper echelons of society. Now, the second way when it comes to corporations is that if a corporation is selling goods, is selling merchandise, is selling things that are made from, let's say, exploitative labor and is harmful to the environment. And if people are aware of this, if people are out there protesting against this, then this company is now incentivized to stop doing this, to change their policies, to make it more friendly so that the people who are actually purchasing them would be more likely to purchase it. Now, this is a unique benefit that only exists in our side of the house. And for all those reasons, we think opposition should take the debate today. Thank you.
Thank you, side opposition. We shall now invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue their case. Deputy Prime Minister from Institute Sinaran, you may continue the debate.
Hello. All right. Apologies. Sorry, I had technical problems just now. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Prime Minister said just now, you said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that I have to switch on my camera. Apologies. To the Prime Minister, you said that if people are more willing to believe that they can be involved in changing the world, or that they believe that they can have an impact on the world, then there would be a greater degree of membership. And you said that some people are not willing to spend more for a tote bag rather than a plastic bag. For example, you have to pay like 20 cents more to get a a tote bag. But some people don't have that luxury. Some people don't have 20 cents to spare. Some people might use that 20 cents to buy something else. It would go into something else, because not everyone is a part of the upper class community or even middle class. Not everyone is rich. That's what I'm trying to say. And you also said that politicians would have more incentive because they think that if they're more capable of change, then they would be more willing to take on action to change that negative effect, to change it into something more positive. But I disagree, because some politicians would only perform for the public and not really do thorough research and develop, and it might be an improper process. Moving on to my points. My first point links back to your point, which is accessibility. No matter how much and how long we protest, in the end, it would be hard for us to completely remove mega corporations that are non-environmentally conscious. This is because they monopolize a lot of industries that are ultimately essential in society. Or in other words, a lot of people would be worse off without them. And well, 40% of the population in Malaysia is part of the M40 group, or middle class, and 16% is part of the B40 group, or the lower class. So this just proves the point that not everyone has the luxury to spend more or to choose alternatives that are more environmentally conscious, because they have to buy from companies that are not, as I mentioned, environmentally conscious, because, well, they don't simply just because they don't have any other cheaper alternatives. And by buying these products from these companies, they are contributing to them and giving them more money, but they don't have the option to choose other companies. They can't boycott them fully because they operate these in non-environmentally friendly companies operate in multiple industries that it would be hard for us to pinpoint which one exactly is a bad company. For example, Nestle is named as the biggest producer of plastic in a 2018 report, and yet they are still one of the biggest companies in the world. That just goes to show that no matter how much you try to remove yourself and not contribute to them, they still monopolize a lot of industries. Nestle controls and owns a lot of companies. Kit Kat, L'Oreal, Purina, however you pronounce that, Friskies, and Nescafe, and so much more, around 2,000 plus. And looking for a substitute would affect people from the lower class negatively, because these non-environmentally friendly companies offer the cheapest options. So to find a substitute or an alternative would just be more harder for them. It would make their lives harder. And that's just simply something that is a fact. And another example is fast food, McDonald's. McDonald's is the biggest contributor to the global warming crisis because they are the largest user of beef. And methane emitted from cattle is a major contributor to the global warming crisis. And fast food is seen as the cheapest option. It's the fastest option, as it's named. And it's for very busy people who work, say, 2 jobs, from the lower class. They don't have the luxury to cook for themselves. They don't have the time to prepare food. More so if they have a family to take care of. So fast food might be the best option for them. And that's why it's still a famous option or a popular preference among people. And also, going green might be hard for some people. The vegan lifestyle is expensive. Some people have health issues that might prevent them from not being able, some people have health issues that make it necessary for them to consume meat, and also financial issues that prevent them from living a green life. And also because we can't avoid plastic fully, because a lot of corporations use plastic. And so it's hard because we don't have power over that. And it's useless because no matter how much we try to avoid plastic, for example, buying laundry detergent in a cardboard box, you'd still find plastic inside because plastic is simply everywhere. Every company uses plastic, so it's hard for us. And not to mention microplastics as well. Another example is fast fashion. A lot of people are consumers of fast fashion. For example, Shane, Mango, H&M, Boohoo, Forever 21, or Urban Outfitters. They are socially and they impact the social. They impact the environment and social situations negatively. And for example, Shane uses child labor. And H&M, even though they made great progress in eliminating harmful chemicals, they still have problems with paying their workers. And my second point is not a lot of companies adopt CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. And even if they do, companies only do performative activism in order to please customers, when in truth, they are still big contributors to social and environmental issues. For example, Amazon, they have been greatly criticized for providing horrible working conditions for their workers, for their employees. And Pepsi, even when they voiced out for the BLM movement, it was insensitive and out of tune because it was the infamous Kendall Jenner ad where she ran out and said, have I run out of time? Have I run out of time? No? Okay, sorry. And Disney, not all representation is equal. So for the conclusion my 2 points is that companies do performative activism, and also not a lot of people have access to making a positive change because not everyone has that luxury to perform in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, government side. Now let us please invite the Deputy Leader Opposition to continue their case.
Am I? Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, am I visible and am I audible right now?
Yes, you are.
Can't hear them again, though.
Just speak through your thing.
I'll just speak through mine. Yeah. Hold on. We're having that. Am I visible and audible now?
You are audible and you're visible.
Hi. Nice. Thank you. Just want to clarify for POIs. The chat POI doesn't work. So if you guys want to ask a POI, just unmute yourself or on your camera and I'll notice you. So basically just try to flag me by either unmuting and asking POI or just like on your camera. But at the worst case, I'll still ask for POI towards the end near the 6 minute. So starting my timer and beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think that it is deplorable in today's debate. The push from government comes in a very simplistic manner, number one, but comes in a manner that just wants to push very small narrative. We tell you that it is deplorable as well, that there's this entire issue of us allowing ourselves, people of a certain degree of privilege as the average person, to remove ourselves and detach ourselves from the social movement and to allow these corporations to perpetrate worse harms. So before moving on to the case as an extension from opposition, a few quick replies. Externalist replies first, right? They talk about this entire issue of people not having certain degrees of access to make choice. We do agree that people do not have choice. We do agree that the most marginalized communities have our choice, and this will be integrated into my case later on. But just a quick reply is that if we accept the narrative that people do not have a choice to opt out of the movement, if we accept that certain marginalized groups therefore inherently and intuitively cannot make the choice to opt themselves out of a social movement, doesn't that mean that by allowing the average average person to remove themselves from believing that they have a certain degree of impact in the social movement, it then means that these people now are worse off on their side, because the very fact that the average people who have some leeway of privilege are now also removing themselves from the equation. Number two, on performative activism and corporations, right? I think that both sides agree that corporations is bad. I don't know why they feel this necessity to push and make a distinction that it is an asymmetrical benefit that corporate harms. I'll take it later. I don't see why it's only on their side. And our reply to that is that is fair, and that we do agree that corporations in general do just operate within the overturned window and not beyond it. I think that this is something that both sides agree. I think that this is something that my Allo characterized as well, pretty fairly as well. So just moving on to the case that we want to come out. So first and foremost, we need to understand the impacting of today's debate. Understand, panel, the base of the characterization of my Allo, we understand a few key things in today's debate. We understand that people believe on our side that they can make a certain degree of change, and this incentivizes them to go out and protest. This incentivizes them to believe that they have a voice, incentivizes them to go out and make change. We tell you then that when the impact of this on their side, when this does not happen, is that it makes everything worse in the long run. 4 levels of analysis to this. Number 1, lack of ground-up mobility. What this looks like is, understand, panel, that when there is no change as characterized from my Allo, from the bottom to the up, this then means that people do not have an incentive to make a certain degree of change. What this looks like is corporations are not making any degree of change because their active consumer base is not forcing them to make change. This is not something that they can co-opt on their side, because the very fact that when you concede that people realize that they don't have a certain degree of sway over the social and environmental movement, this then means that people do not make choices in keeping in consideration with the social and environmental movement. Understand then that the second layer is corporate incentive. Corporations now have zero incentive to change on their side, because the very fact, as characterized by my Allo, people just don't care about the environment, so corporates don't have an incentive to care, because corporates are very profit driven. But we also need to understand, as the third layer, the impacts on the marginalized people in general. Understand, panel, the marginalized people of the communities on their side are just worse off. We think that at the very least, even if we lose everything, the very fact that the weakest in our society are better off on our side is enough to win this debate, because the very fact that on their side, when these marginalized people are ignored by the average people, to a degree, they stand by as active watchers and just allow these corporations to abuse these people even further. We tell you then that these people are worse off because exploitation just becomes worse. Long run, then this skews the economy. I'll take it later near the 6 minutes. This skews the economy and the environment way over. So now I'm going to move on to you about the benefits in the movement in the long run from the side that we push. We tell you a few layers of analysis to this. Number 1, a push on change. We tell you that the push on change happens because the movement encourages people to come out, and therefore then it becomes corporately beneficial. I think this has been characterized very well by my Allo. Don't really have to go into it. What I really want to observe in today's debate, and I think that that's what very important in ranking us above government, is the comparative weighing and prioritization in today's debate. Understand, panel, that if we weigh against their best case of people having a certain degree of active choice, we still win this debate. Why? Their best case, a quick characterization of what it looks like, is people are allowed to make choice. They don't necessarily explain why the impacting is as to why choice is so important for marginalized communities, but we can be charitable and assume that this is probably going to intuitively mean that people on their side get to make a choice because they are disprivileged. But we tell you that then on our side, our worst case is that all these things that we want to push just do not manifest themselves whatsoever. Meaning to say that all the change that Kavishnu wants to talk about get zero manifestations in the corporate spectrum, get zero manifestations in the upper echelons of society. Even then we win this debate, because number 1, we already proved to you as to why we better actually co-opt the benefits that they want to talk about. But number 2, also, even if we get minimal impact and completely fail to get corporations onto our side, the people are still empowered, and this creates and manifests into 3 things, panel. Understand, 1, this is a resistance to lobbying on our side, meaning to say corporate people are more resistant. I'll take it later, and therefore they are not going to buy into the corporate lobbying, such as, oh, Shell is actually good for you, or Nestle doesn't exploit children. They're not going to buy into this lobbying. And number 2, there's a belief of change. This belief of change has been heavily characterized already. But number 3, what this leads to is the power of voting. Understand, panel, that as much as this is what they should be pushing in today's debate, that corporations can push certain narratives. We tell you that even if corporations push this narrative, the very fact is, for the people and for the politicians, in terms of the symmetry of the state, the power of vote is resistant towards lobbying on our side. Meaning to say that people do not sway into corporate lobbying. People make choices that are environmentally impactful, and the fourth manifestation of this looks like people, for example, in very radical instances, voting for a green party, or voting for a party that champions social issues. I'll take the POI before I move on to the second point. 3, 2, 1. No POI. Alright. Argument number 2 that we want to push from our side as an extension as well is just the entire.
Oh, I'm sorry, my internet wasn't working with me just now.
Okay, fine. I'll take the POI.
All right. You said just now that people have the power to vote. But what do you say about performative activism, where companies only react as a knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah, thanks. That actually ties into my second argument. So the second argument about the watering down of the movement by corporations and why strong grassroots push is inherently better. Panel, understand that corporations and an actor want profit as characterized and accepted by both sides. If both sides then agree that corporations is bad, they do not explain to us why the detachment of social movements, people caring about social movements, necessarily good. So we're going to talk to you now about why corporations just don't care about people on the ground. They don't care about minorities because there's a lack of collective pull in the minorities because minorities are minorities in the community, both in a capital sense but also in a population sense, meaning to say that this performative activism is worse off on their side because you only allow corporations to push activisms, you don't allow grassroots people to push activisms. But then we must care on it on Gov side because people on the ground have an inherent, number one, prioritization towards minorities, but also they have to prioritize the minorities because understand that towards these movements on the ground, they want to help these people because for them, every person matters. And also then on the very least, even if we do not get any degree of corporate change, at the very least, these grassroots movements create a sense of acceptance within these communities. At the very least, on our side, the marginalized on our side feel a degree of acceptance within the social movements and know that there are people championing for their rights. Due to these reasons, please vote for opposition in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, opposition side. We shall now hear from the government whip.
Okay. Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but Ryan, your camera is
always inverted.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you can't change that.
Oh,
I think there's something wrong with my laptop. Is this okay? Will this do?
Is it a plug-in camera or something?
It's the laptop camera.
Oh.
Integrated camera, yes.
I think you can just move on.
All right, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to state points made by the government. First is individual participation in social and environmental movements are messy. Second, accessibility. And third, performative activism. Okay, now I'd like to rebut the opposition leader. The opposition leader state that people actively believing they can change through these movements. When they believe and policies are put into play, mega corporations will follow. But where is the proof that mega corporations are following the policies that play a role into conserving the environment and also in helping to relieve stresses in society? From some of the examples I will give, this proves incorrect that mega corporations are doing their job in following the policies made by people around the globe and other movements. So first example is the anti-Iraq war. The anti-Iraq war is one of the largest synchronized protests where 10 billion people worldwide protest against the war in Iraq. However, 1 month later, the Iraq war started. This proves that the anti-Iraq war protest was unsuccessful. Second, recently, there was a mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers died. Mass shooting involving 4 or more people, not including the suspects, were killed. This has been the average of this has averaged more than 1 per day so far this year in year 2022, according to Washington Post in July.
POI?
Rejected.
Okay, so this proves that mega corporations, according to the examples, like big weapon companies, they do not follow the policies and the movements made by the globe. If the gun companies, weapon companies, and artilleries and ammos all follow the policies initiated by the globe and society, mass shootings would not have occurred frequently and the death rate would have been lowered. Okay, now I would like to rebut the deputy opposition leader, where he said society does not push companies to make changes. However, I would like to say that this is untrue and that does push companies to make changes. There are a lot of protests against the use of plastics. And however, some companies, like especially electronic companies, they still use plastics in their devices instead of, let's say, materials such as metals or aluminiums. Why does these profitable companies use plastics? Because plastics are cheaper than metal. These companies truly care about profit rather than the environmental changes. So, and they care so much on profit that they are willing to use cheap materials instead of expensive materials like metals in order to create an increase in their profit rather than conserving the plastic that we have on Earth and which could lead to conservation of the environment. Other than that, not only electronic companies are using plastics nowadays, but also kitchenware companies where they use plastics in their kitchenwares, such as plates and glasses. Other than that, a lot of stalls, especially in Malaysia, small stalls, they use plastics more often rather than, let's say, expensive materials that could conserve the environment. This is because most companies, the big companies, they do not really initiate any helpful hands towards the small communities in providing useful materials that could replace plastics in order to run their businesses. Then, now I would like to reinforce some of my government's points. Altadit said that not a lot of company adopt CSR, and this is true, especially in like my examples. Some of the big electronic companies and common appliances companies such as kitchenwares, clothings, and other stuffs that we need to use in our daily lives. If we look to in our daily lives, most of us use plastics on a daily basis because these companies, they use plastics in making their items and their products. This all caters to their profit gain, and they will continue to do this if their profit is increasing. However, if their profit does not increase, maybe they will use more expensive products in order to gain our trust back and help make us trust them and buy their products. With that, I would like to conclude on the government side. Thank you.
Thank you, government. We shall now invite the opposition whip to continue the debate.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible and visible.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Wait. Okay, I couldn't hear you just now. Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible. Can you hear me?
I can't hear them again. No, I can't hear them. Yeah. No, I swapped again. Hello, sorry, can you please speak again?
Testing, testing. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. But like, no, but they, it's right.
It's so bad. Get out of here, man.
You're
No,
audible. No, but like I can't hear them. So if they want, if they want,
on the panel. Should be okay now.
So can someone say something if I can hear you?
Testing, testing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so since POIs can't be put in chat as it seems, I will only be accepting verbal POI. So please unmute and put forward your POI if you want me to accept it, hopefully. Okay, so okay, panel. Now, what has this debate basically boiled down to? Now, the main crux of this debate has basically fallen to two things. How much of an impact have we, the average people, actually had on social and environmental movements, and exactly how can these changes be better implemented on the government side if people were useless? Now, this boils down to the main actors, which are how is it we as people have made better changes than if it was just companies. Now, this looks like the extent to which we cover things. So as people, we better take care of the main stakeholders of these things, which are obviously the people who are suffering the most, which is obviously the environment, or in terms of social movements, those who are marginalized or underprivileged. So these look like minorities. Now, how can we ensure that with the people side, we better cover minorities? Because with minorities, they need representation in order for their problems to be viewed or to be even taken action by. But without the representation of people, the average people, to spread this awareness and to see the problems that we have, how can we ensure these problems will ever be covered? Now, what side government has brought up is about performative activism and things that basically are inconsequential. Now, this is exactly the problem with removing the average person from pushing for change, because when people aren't there to push for change, not only is the change less heard and less pushed forward, but even the change in and of itself is less radical or less effective or covers less grounds, because all companies have to do is appease to the majority, and therefore they'll obviously pick the easiest options or the most business savvy options, which tend to be performative activism. So that's why we think on opposition side, we have taken over how it's exclusive on our side that we managed to cover the stakeholders, which are the minorities and those marginalized by social problems. Now, moving on to exactly how this is, moving on to the burdens that we had to prove and the burdens that government had to prove. Now, the burdens that government had to prove is exactly why would removing people help big companies make a better change. Now, what government has put forward is that people have no privilege whatsoever. Like, not everyone is rich, not everyone has the option to choose. But however, we put this, first of all, that's a wrong statement, because people to some degree have an ability to choose. Like, I can choose which company I would like to do business with or like to buy things from. So that in and of itself is already a choice. And moving on, we do agree that not everyone is privileged, but why should this remove you from believing that you have a change? Because it is exactly the people who are not privileged that should be fighting for their rights. Like, that's the whole point of social movements. Social movements are movements regarding people who have no privilege, who have no choice. And therefore, they should be the ones who believe that they have to fight, because this fosters, leading into an extension from what my deputy opposition leader said, that when people believe they can make a change, it not only leads to a bigger base, but even a stronger base of social movements, because when people believe they have change, they have hope. Therefore, it allows unity to occur. Unity is not only in terms of having more people agree on the same thing, but having people be able to work on the same thing, thereby pushing these social movements and environmental movements even harder and further, except the POI.
Do not have the all that. So you agree that even if we are from low income households, we have to contribute our time and money and avoid our day jobs? How would you say that impacts negative to?
Okay, first of all, I didn't say that I didn't say everyone doesn't have a choice. I'm saying that for the blanket statement that not everyone has a choice is wrong, because there are those who have a choice. But what I managed to say is that even the people who don't have choice should be involved in this. We're not saying that the people without privilege and without choice should be spending just as much money into campaigns as, let's say, Leonardo DiCaprio or whoever, or should be putting in all their time. But just because they can't put in as much as more privileged people does not mean they should remove themselves from the equation entirely, because not only can they make a change by actually at least participating in these things, or at least even believing that they can have change by fostering in more people to join, or at least joining these movements to participate. But most of the times they are the crux of these social movements, isn't it? Because, like, let's say we talk about the civil rights movement, and at the time in the 1960s, black people didn't have as much rights as white people. So are you saying just because they don't have rights, they shouldn't have fought for their own civil rights movement? No. So in fact, it's not only that they can contribute in other ways, it's that these marginalized people are often the ones that have to contribute, because these social movements and environmental movements obviously are the ones that affect them the most, making them the biggest stakeholders, not only in terms of the actual impact, but in terms of the fact that they are the most vulnerable. Therefore, not only are they the best ones to actually give a broad example of what these problems are, they are the best ones to actually advocate for these problems, because it's their problems most of the time. Now, moving on to how we think that we have taken this debate in terms of weighing. Now, the three things that should have been weighed in this debate is exactly which side of the argument gives the best impact. Now, on government side, they are arguing that people are useless and that companies are like performative and all that. So exactly how does that help any social movement at all? Because if there's no people there's no check and balance for these companies, they will just do just that. If they won't help people, the most they will do is performative activism, which leads to nothing, and even we are sick of it. But on the opposition side, we have actually fleshed out exactly why not only do we make a change, but we make a better change, because when people are there to push these things, it's a bottom-up structure in which the people can push for change and lobby these companies and these rich people to do things to a greater extent, and are be able to actually give out proper perspective on these problems, whereas companies would just think, okay, this is a problem, we'll just cover whatever we see, whereas people themselves are the ones who are on the ground. Like for racism, it's everyday racism that we see that is the main problem in society. Companies don't see this, so how would they know that these are problems, and how would they know how to address these? These are things that exclusively benefit on opposition side, because we are the only ones with the actors who are able to understand these problems and actually take action against them. So that's why we take the metric on who brings the best impact. Now, second of all, is about who best limits the perpetrators. Like, obviously, the problems don't come out from their own. Problems come from someone. Who are these coming out from? Even government has considered that the most perpetrators are the companies themselves, who are by incentive, as profit incentive, to actually destroy the environment or to take advantage of minorities. So if we are allowing people to remove themselves from the equation and saying it's not my problem, or I'm not at fault because I can't do anything, what happens then? The companies themselves take free rein and do whatever they want, and obviously what they want is not in the best interest of the environment and the people. Whereas on our side, we have provided exactly why people believing they have a change is actually allowing check and balance. So the final metric is as we have clearly mentioned, who is the biggest stakeholders, and we have exactly mentioned why it's minorities and those marginalized groups, and we have actually fleshed out why these minority groups are best defended on our side, because in our side, minority groups are only in our side are minority groups able to address the problems they face, can make changes, and actually be a part of their own movements, rather than leaving it to the hands of their corporate overlords to do whatever. And that's why on these three weighing scales, on these metrics, we have taken this debate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that we are here from the three speakers from both sides, we shall now have 3 minutes for both sides to make their reply speech, starting from now.
Beginning my reply in 3, 2, 1. Panel, understand that in today's debate, the burdens that are pushed by both sides do draw symmetry, but also have external benefits on our side, which are not reaped by the government's case. So what were the burdens pushed to you by government? Government pushes two main burdens. One, they want to allow a better concept of choice in the debate. But number two, they also want to push to you this idea of performative activism. Why performative activism is necessarily bad? And the issue that we have with these burdens is they don't necessarily mechanize as to what the harms of these burdens are. Now, moving on to Op's case. Op proves to you a few things. Op seeks to prove to you a few things. Number one, marginal privilege. I think that this is a case that came out from both the yellow and especially the yellow speech extended by the Op whip. Number two, a better collective change in the sense that when you have collective unity, people push for better change. But these are the cases that run in symmetry. External benefits then that are pushed by Op when these individual in of themselves make the choice to care about the environment and care about the social movement. The unique benefits we push to you are seen in quite a few narratives. They are seen in terms of beneficial to the individuals, especially in minorities. It looks like the corporations going, yeah, I need to prioritize the environment. Yeah, I need to prioritize the social movement because my consumer base, who is the said individual, is within that consumer base. So to prove to you why we win today's debate, we only need to prove to you the symmetry, but to draw the margin of why we win, we're going to prove to you why we necessarily reap the external benefits. In my way, I want to explain to you why we outweigh them. Understand, panel, that the biggest push that comes up from their side is on the concept of choice, the concept of individual autonomy to not be within the movement for the average person. Arif and the DLO then comes out here and presents to you the concept of some people being less privileged than others, some people being able to make the choice and some people not. Arif in this instance already explains to you then that these people are people that cannot choose in the status quo. These are people that are not the average people. These are the marginalized communities that we want to protect. We tell you then through our speeches that the marginalized people are very, very important in the debate because of the fact that they cannot make the choice that these average individuals can. We tell you that therefore as an average individual, you are obliged to make a choice towards them. But also what we prove to you, and before that, we just think that this entire analysis completely outweighs the concept of choice because the concept of choice operates in a vacuum and does not necessarily manifest the harms. Meaning to say that even if the panel and even if Op buys the case, they don't necessarily explain to us why it's bad. They don't necessarily explain to us why the harms on their side are worse than our side. Whereas on our side, as seen through RA's speech in the weighing, we provide you so much of weighing as to why the harms are worse, why our harms or people not caring what companies do is worse, why this means that companies run amok and completely destroy the economy, destroy the social movements, and destroy the environment. But also the externalities that we prove to you as a result of the individual making the choice to support the social movement, to believe that they have the choice, to believe that they have an impact, are seen in our speeches. When Kavishnu tells you that this means that now companies are going to care about the environment, they are going to produce more environmentally conscious products, and this derives itself as a benefit in utility to the very consumer, to the average individual in today's debate. So because of that, on that external benefit, we win. But also in the Diallo's case, where he talks to you about a necessary check and balance in votes, we win to you on this side because it was completely unchallenged. Panel, understand that in today's debate, Gov provides to you a simplistic view and does not manifest the harms. I think that there's nothing much to address in terms of the harms other than a few extraneous examples that they give. But if we're going to give examples, this debate goes on. Whereas on Op, we provide to you extensive analysis as to why our actors will believe in a certain way, as to why corporations believe in a certain way, as to why there are unique external benefits that you reap seen consistently throughout each speech in the debate, and also because of the fact that we prove to you that on the metrics that Gov wants to win, which is choice, we still win on choice because we benefit the most marginalized in the community and because we reap much, much more external benefit to the average individual anyway. For all these reasons, Op has to win to this debate.
Thank you for the speech. Government's second speaker, are you ready for the reply speech?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So you may start now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that indeed our role in social and environmental movements have been useless. Why? The opposition pointed out that corporations do not change because their audiences protest, but companies do not change simply because they do not want to. Because if they wanted to, they would, believe me, because they have the time and the money. Performative activism is a major problem where companies, performative activism is a major problem with these companies because, like I said, it only happens on the surface. And we're average people, we're lay people. How are we supposed to know if they have really changed or if they only claim to? And if they claim to have changed and we stop protesting and we stop because we believe that they have already changed, how are we supposed to know? We have no way of knowing. As big companies with money, as big companies with money and time to do research and development, they have the automatic responsibility to study on what their impact on the environment is so that they can change it. How are we supposed to find out specifically each company, what their problem is, and fix those problems by protesting? The second one is that people are empowered. You said the opposition pointed out that people are empowered even though there is minimal impact. We believe that protesting is messy because there's no change either way. How long should we protest? Forever and ever and ever? We're gonna keep protesting against these companies. We're gonna keep going out on these streets saying how much we want them to change. In the long run, that seems ridiculous and impossible. And people do care, but there is no impact. There is no impact at all, zero, because people are simply tired. Because even if we protest, we see no change within these companies. We don't see their progress. It only happens if they think that it is a profitable option. For example, like Amazon. We know, and we have pointed out, and we have protested that their employees are in horrible conditions, but they don't care. They know that they have their responsibility, but they don't care because to change that would mean to minimize their profits. So, in conclusion, people are useless in social and environmental movements because people with companies with more money have more power. In the end, the rich stay rich and they're not going to care. They're not going to empathize with average people because they want to keep having money. They want to keep having cash flow. And people care, but we don't see any change because people are there because we're not removed at the end of the day. We're just tired. As average people, we have day jobs, and these companies, it's their job to fix the problems that we're facing at the end. It's a double-edged, we're at the end of the stick. They're in control of it because they have the power, they have the money. Why should we be the one to protest? So that's the conclusion of the government side. Thank you.
Thank you, debaters from both sides, Institute, Sinara, and Sunway College. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this debate. We have heard an interesting debate, ideas coming out from both sides. So now let us allow our educators to go into the breakout rooms to deliberate. Debaters, please kindly also wait in the meeting. Thank you. moderator to give his or her oral education and also announce the winner for this round of debate. Adjudicators, you may proceed with your oral feedback.
Okay, sorry, I was waiting for the live stream to go on. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for debating just now. It was a very good debate, I have to say. First of all, let's give our results. Between the three of us, we thought that for this debate, opposition was more consistent and it was more stronger. So we have to give the win to opposition. Now, the way we're going to give our conclusion and the overall conclusions is that I will be giving conclusion for government. Ira will then be giving conclusion for op, and in the end, Amar will conclude it overall, our speeches. So number one, government. 1 second. Government, I understand that you gave us three very good arguments. The first argument was that individual participation is messy, it will cause more harm. Number two is that companies are doing performance activism. And number three, not all people are privileged to make choices. So first of all, when you said that individual participation is messy, I really liked when you gave examples. You said that even though people do protests, even though people go on the streets and they riot, it will just cause more harm, even though these companies won't realize it that much. All these people that are going to protest, all these marginalized communities that are actually affected, they won't actually get the benefits from what the companies are doing. This would have been a really good argument, but I don't think throughout the debate you flesh it out enough. I only ever heard this being said once, which was by the Prime Minister, the very first speaker. She gave this point once, and then after that, you guys didn't fully flesh it out more. Because after that, Op then said that even though this individual participation is messy and there was a lot of harm that could have been done to it, it's still one step forward, sorry, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that sort of thing. People will still realize that people are writing and it will turn radical. So even though it was a good argument, Op managed to cut it back down. The second argument, which is performative activism, personally, I thought this was a very strong argument and that you guys really carried it towards the end. It kept going on, and even though Op rebutted it, I felt like you guys still managed to carry it up until the end. So first of all, you said that these performative activisms, all these companies will just do it for show. They just want people, the example that you gave, a very good example was that a politician, even though they won't really care because it's all about profit, they'll just do it for show, and in reality they won't really fight back and actually give them the efforts that they will proceed. So as in, once they get the votes, the politicians get the votes, the politician won't give back all of the efforts. So I thought this was a very good point, an argument that was very well done, and this was the best argument out of the three. You fleshed it out really well. Thirdly, you said that not all people are privileged, so that means that they can't really make choices. For instance, you said that marginalized communities won't be able to make choices because they can only stick to one brand, a brand that's cheap enough to afford. Op managed to rebut this very well, so this argument didn't stand well enough. So that's all for government side. Out of all the three arguments, the best argument was the performative activism. So I'll be giving the mic over to Ira to conclude on opposition side.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, guys. So I'll be summarizing for side opposition. So side opposition, I feel like the debates, the points that you guys brought for us today was how you guys were going to prove that people thinking they're useful or contribute can help to convince or push other companies to make a change as well. And you guys also talked a lot about marginalized communities and how it's better for people on the ground to be involved because they are directly affected. I feel like it's both of your points are really, really great. You guys also provided a pretty good elaboration on it. For example, you said how you showed to us, you really highlighted the stakeholders in the debate today, which I think side government didn't really say. You talked about about the stakeholders being like the environment, also the marginalized communities, basically all the people that's being oppressed and are the ones directly affected. And you talked about how we need to have that their efforts are not useless, and we do need these efforts in order to convince companies, because they are the ones that are directly affected. They know what's going on, and thus they are the ones that have to try and make noise in order to be heard. Second of all, I think that towards the performative activism point held by explained by side government, you guys could have done better to respond to that, because there is a response towards performative activism, because government said that the reason why efforts by individuals are useless is by an average person is useless is because even though these average people are just fighting for a certain cause, these companies could just be like, okay, fine, we'll make a change. They make a change. For example, they introduce a new policy or a new product, when in reality it's not really effective, and it actually contributes to harm in another way. And the thing is, these individuals and average people won't know it. They think that, oh, finally there's a change that's happening, when in reality, their efforts are not coming to fruition. I believe that there wasn't really much engagement on your side towards that point that government had, but you guys could have responded by saying, oh, perhaps like when people will eventually realize that these companies are carrying out performative activism, and thus these individuals and average people are the ones who will continue to fight to ensure that these companies finally change their policies to become more suitable for the benefit of the environment, for benefit of these causes. And that's why I believe that you guys could have done better on that. But other than that, I think that your points were really good, and side government could have responded better to your points. You guys also proved to us why having people involved would do more good, and why our efforts are not useless, because if people on the ground aren't fighting for it, then who will, right? Other than that, I think you guys did really well. Yeah, so.
All right, hi, can you guys hear me and see me? Or can you?
Yes, we can.
All right, okay. So, as a conclusion for the entire debate, I'm unable to really go in depth with the arguments that you guys gave, because I'm quite new to this and I don't really want to give a uninformed and unprofessional judgment. But as someone that's just watching the debate overall, I think I really enjoyed the engagement. It's definitely something that could have been improved on. I wish there was a bit more engagement between the government and the opposition. And I wish that the second speaker from the opposition would have spoken a bit at a slower pace, so that I could have understood and maybe take in everything that you mentioned in your cases and your points. I enjoyed the rebuttals given, but from the whips, both the whips actually, both were really good. And I think that was what made the debate enjoyable, the engagement, I guess. Other than that, I think both teams did really well, and there's definitely something that everyone can improve on. That's all for me. Thank you so much for this debate.
Thank you. So overall, the whole debate, there was good engagement, opposition and government. You guys engaged well, as in you guys were rebutting each other. And the arguments that you guys gave, it really gave until the end. One more point that I would like to say is that one thing about government is that you guys had a really strong argument, but you never really said what you wanted at the end of the day. So that's just one thing to improve on. So thank you and congratulations to opposition for taking the win.
Thank you, educators and all the debaters who participate in this round of debate. This marks the end for our morning session of this TEDxYouth KYUEM at Debate Showcase 2022. We are going to continue after lunch, and just a small reminder for debaters from Sunway and Institute Sinaran. Please be back at 2:20 as the prep will start at 2:30. So thank you and have a nice day, everyone.
Okay, thank you.